Okay, hi, friends. And after a very busy day, when so many things did not work, including the entire sound system on my present computer, which consumed 4 hours of what I would normally have dedicated to this process, we're ready to go on to program number 37 in Telepathy and the Etheric Vehicle. The 30th of November it is today, and we're starting a completely new section. We are definitely halfway through the book, even in a way 1 page more than halfway. And this is called, this section is called Telepathic Sensitivity, a Normal Unfoldment. And it goes on for quite a few pages, 15 pages, so it's going to be a number of programs. There's no way I can possibly do that tonight, but though the hour is fairly late, I'd like to offer a little bit, now that I'm assured that you have been hearing program number 36. I was a little panic-stricken when I could get no sound at all. Apparently, some kind of Windows update was corrupted or corrupting my system, and well, that's just how it went, unfortunately. But let's go on with the Tibetan and try to keep as much of this instruction in our minds. I wish I had another 50 years to help bring these books to you. Now, new books will be written, and they will begin to be offered around the year 2025. And that is a cause for great joy, at least for someone like me, and maybe for many of you as well, that the Tibetan will complete his 3-part offering, bridging toward the knowledge of the new age. And who knows what will be offered, but we know that from what Blavatsky has given and what Alice Bailey has given, that whatever the Tibetan offers will be astonishing in its illumination and its relevance. So let's see if we can pull some of this together, and the entire rest of the book is here below as well as all that has foregone. This takes us to page 94, 194, 195, and we already are on page 94. So if we double that, we have signs of encouragement. So the Tibetan says in this new section, you will have noticed that I have given no instructions as to the art of developing telepathic sensitivity. And if I can again point out, may I suggest, that the word art is a significant word, and it involves the intuitive wielding of a science, because sometimes he calls this the science of telepathy. And DK is reviewing here when he says, the reason is, as I have told you before, that this sensitivity should be and always is a normal unfoldment when the disciple is correctly oriented and completely dedicated and learning decentralization. Well, let's take a look at those. The disciple is correctly oriented, completely dedicated, and learning decentralization. Let's measure ourselves against that. And I'll just, put yourself in that position. Toward what are you oriented? Am I, completely dedicated? And have we stepped beyond our personality focus, what we might call our lower ego focus? When DK uses the word ego, it usually means something higher, but in modern psychology, ego is pretty well equivalent to the personality. I guess this means that we're thinking of others more than ourselves, that we're really giving everything we have to what must be done, and that we're oriented towards the master and towards higher points of tension. Okay. This would be a desirable position for us. A normal unfoldment. And the one thing, well, there's many things, but let's just say that forcing development when dealing with occultism, spiritual occultism, is usually a rather dangerous process. Just the way, from another context, forcing the rising of the Kundalini, especially along channels that are not intended by the monadic type of the individual, is a dangerous process and can lead to lives when repair must be undertaken. We don't want to lay up trouble for ourselves in the future by pushing ahead in an unsanctioned manner. and esoterically unsanctioned manner. So let's see what DK says. Maybe I've said something of what he will say here. If it is a forced process, then the sensitivity developed is not normal and carries with it much difficulty and future danger. Okay. Well, that's a summary of what I just said. Normality is required, and yeah, we're doing okay. I just want you to be able to see what I'm talking about, and carries with it much difficulty and danger. Now, the Tibetan is never going to speak lightly of these things. If he says it is so, my experience anyway tells me he is to be believed. And maybe your experience tells you the same. And we'll go on here. Where the disciple is concerned, release from the constant consideration of personal circumstances and problems. Remember, may I suggest I talked about that glamour of circumstance that beset one of the more promising disciples with an unusual ray makeup, 1, 5, 5, 6, 7. He was frustrated by surrounding circumstance, and I think we remember that when we're trying to reach people, we have to get through the circumstances which surround them and which preoccupy them. So, where the disciple is concerned, release from the constant consideration of personal circumstances and problems lead inevitably to clear mental release. May I suggest a situation in which we are not plagued by illusion and the confinement or confinements of the concrete mind. This then, the Tibetan goes on, this then provides those areas of free mental perception which make the higher sensitivity possible. That is interesting. The use of the word areas and free mental perception, not a dogmatic confinement in areas which cannot possibly lead to higher points of tension, nor make it possible for us to get through to others, even if our task, excuse me, our illuminative task with respect to others is quite humble. So we have to learn release from these matters, clear mental release. Wonder what that would be like. Let's ponder just for a moment. Clear mental release. The emotional body will not be trammeled by glamour, and the mental body will not be constricted beyond the hope of touching more real states of consciousness, and even the hope of getting through to others. Now, obviously, this kind of statement is going to require pondering. I can only imagine, and I think I've said it before, that when the disciples of the time organized into this particular seed group, received these instructions, how many hours it must have required to pore over them, to dwell with them, to see whether one truly understood. If the student was a good and conscientious student, I would consider those hours spent an inevitability. So probably quite a bit of pondering on this material has already occurred, and that in a way opens the door for us, because their work has an effect on our work. Now, going on with the Tibetan, gradually as the disciple acquires true freedom of thought and the power to be receptive to the impression of the abstract mind, may I suggest that impression does work upon what we normally call the causal body or the soul, and also it can be brought down into the mind of the personality if it is more illumined and less constricted. So when they've developed true freedom of thought and the power to be receptive to the impression of the abstract mind, he creates for himself a reservoir of thought. Which becomes available at need for the helping of the people, other people, and for the necessities of his growing world service. I think that's an interesting idea, or at least thought. We are, after all, talking about the higher sensitivity and the development of a state of thought that pertains to the spiritual triad. And this to me is of real interest, what I'm just enlarging here a little bit. He creates for himself a reservoir of thought which becomes available at need for the helping of other people. Well, we desire to do that, right? And for the necessities of his growing world service, which, may I suggest, depends upon, to a great extent, the building of the Antikarana, which can be built to connect the mental unit with the monastic permanent atom, but cannot yet be built at the beginning to connect the Antikarana to the higher aspects of the Buddhic plane, the higher two subplanes, and the higher two subplanes of the Atmic plane. That will come in due time. So, of course, patience will be required. Now later, he, interpolating here the disciple, he becomes sensitive to impression from the hierarchy. This is at first purely ashramic, but is later transformed into total hierarchical impression by the time the disciple is a master. So DK seems to be saying, basically, you have to talk about what he seems to be saying, because it's difficult to just ascertain in all circumstances and instances is the word, exactly what he is saying. So he will receive ashramic impression, but later total hierarchical impression by the time the disciple is a master. So, even the master is considered, from a certain perspective, a disciple. And should we receive impression from the ashram, yes, that is, of course, an aspect, at least, of hierarchical impression. So, high thoughts and promptings await us. And it requires that we proceed gradually or gradually, step by step, to render ourselves sensitive to impression from the entire hierarchy. Now, basically, the master is sensitive to impression from the entire hierarchy, and especially from the three great lords, Manu, Bodhisattva, Mahachohan, and also later from the Nirmanakayas and from forms of higher life which rise even above the spiritual triad. Total hierarchical impression. The supreme science of contact, rendering unto us an impression of the great, the totality of the great heart center of our planet, the spiritual hierarchy. Now I realize that for so many of us, these are just words, and we are not experiencing the content of the words. I suppose as we begin to experience impression from the solar angel, it is accompanied by impression from the master, and then eventually from the ashram, and then eventually from the totality of hierarchy. Which would mean, of course, the impression from the Christ, the Bodhisattva. So here's a definition. The plan is then the dynamic substance providing the content of the reservoir of thought on which he can draw. This is a statement of unique and unusual importance. Well, if he's going to say that, we really have to pay attention. Dynamic energy, providing the content of that reservoir of thought upon which he, I interpolate the word increasingly, upon which he can draw. And then this is a statement. He does us the courtesy of alerting us to when the statement is of real importance, which he has done right now. So the plan is, in a way, an arrangement of energies. And within these energies, a reservoir of thought is built up in the mind of the high initiate or of the master, or let's just say in the consciousness of such a being, and it is then second nature to him that he can draw upon this reservoir to be of real service. So it's rare that the Tibetan says something like this This is a statement of unique and unusual importance, which is maybe another way of really inviting us to ponder on this. When he talks about substance, he's really talking about, may I suggest, substance energy. The plan is a configuration of energies. We're not talking about materiality per se. So dynamic means it's moving, it's powerful, it's energetic, and substance is energy. So powerfully moving energies, which help the high initiate or the master build up that reservoir of thought. Just imagine Master DK's reservoir of thought. And let's see, maybe I'll have to check with our computer experts, but maybe I should have put this in stereo. I'm not sure. There are so many little tweaks and adjustments on the technical end of all this. People who have expertise there, for them, it's not a big deal. But for many of us, one tweak too many or one tweak too few, and we may have ruined an entire recording session. Okay. Later still, he becomes sensitive to impression from Shamballa, the Tibetan says, and the quality of the will which implements planetary purpose is added to the content of his available knowledge. So I'm going to put that, because it is the will energy, I think I'm justified in putting that in the red. Well, and the whole thing can be, I think, kind of elevated in the range of our perception. So the average master, well, what do I know about that? But the average master is sensitive to energies coming from, eventually, the entirety of the hierarchy. Looking at the hierarchy as the second great department or center of planetary life. But later, the master becomes sensitive to impressions from Shamballa. And this would be especially so as we begin to move towards the higher two subplanes, which involve the monad, that is, the monadic plane and the logoic plane. So every being has his goal, and we must not overestimate the position of the master, which, as I said before, that tendency sometimes, well, let me start again, that tendency in their students tends to amuse them a little bit because we students, we don't yet have that adjusted sense of right proportion. We don't, and the word from Master Moria is, we don't know how to co-measure. And co-measurement is considered to be one of the most valuable attainments. So to have that adjusted sense of right proportion is to co-measure properly. But in any case, the will for the master will increase, and there will be a growing sense of planetary purpose, and to his considerable knowledge is added this the strengthening of the quality of the will. Well, we don't know what it's like yet to be a master, though we've been told that before long, many initiates of the fifth degree will be needed. Such is the intended advancement for initiates during the Aquarian Age, and I would say probably even more so when we're facing the age of Capricorn, in which so many developments were intended to unfold, which unfolded still sooner under the influence of Aquarius. Aquarius has a great deal of the fifth ray, and maybe this is why some of the expression of the fifth ray had to be curtailed, because it was running ahead of everything else, all the other developments. And in esoteric work, when there is imbalance, there is danger. So let's see, every once in a while the Tibetan makes a kind of summary. And this should have been made red. Yes, because, well, it just should have been. Because it provides convenient stopping places. Like I said, this is a very long section, and I'm beginning much later than I hoped to because of computer malfunctions, which I've been assured by our computer experts were completely beyond my control to either to remedy, and had to do with corruption in certain uploads, or what are they called? Well, I don't know why I'm not remembering, but changes in the configuration of things. So anyway, when he starts with a sentence like, the point which I seek to make here, you know he's headed into one of his useful summaries. The point which I seek to make here, says the Tibetan, however, is the fact of the existence of a growing reservoir of thought, which the disciple has created in response to the many varying impressions to which he has become increasingly sensitive. The ideas, concepts, and spiritual objectives of which he is becoming aware are steadily being formulated by him into thoughts with their appropriated thought forms, and upon these he learns to draw as he seeks to serve his fellow men. Well, I think that is an important kind of semi-paragraph there. The fact of a growing reservoir of thought, which the disciple has created. Okay, so that's one important idea. In response to the many varying impressions. So impressions lead to the creation of a reservoir of thought. Impressions, I'm suggesting here that many and varied impressions lead to the creation of a reservoir of thought. And I'll make this a little larger. It's all in the relative. In response to many and varying impressions to which he is becoming increasingly sensitive. The ideas, if indeed they are ideas, because a true idea has to originate from the spiritual triad, unless the term is being used loosely, like, I have an idea. Well, okay, it's probably more accurately stated, I have a thought. The ideas, concepts, and spiritual objectives to which he is becoming aware, are steadily being formulated by him into thoughts with their appropriated thought forms. And upon these he learns to draw as he is seeking to help his fellow men. Thoughts and appropriated thought forms. So in the relativity of things. I'll have few different sizes, and hopefully they give some indication. And then the ideas, concepts, and spiritual objectives of which he is becoming aware, slowly, naturally, gradually, without forcing the issue. DK even tells us, and he knows, that overmuch study leads to rebellion against the study. And he uses a peculiar word or phrase, "Can these dry bones live?" he asks. So he knows what it's like to force and forge ahead in his studies. But if a more natural approach is taken, then that particular type of rebellion can be avoided. Here, ideas and concepts are actually perhaps quite different. Spiritual objectives are certainly different, but the point is, he is formulating these into thoughts which with their appropriated thought forms. Appropriated, made one's own, taken to oneself as one's own. And upon these he learns to draw as he seeks to serve his fellow men. I imagine that for Master DK it's totally second nature. He's so accustomed to this formulation, which he has made over centuries, that it's rather automatic what he can draw upon to help any particular needy disciple or discipleship group. Okay, so a little more here. He finds himself, says the Tibetan, he finds himself in possession of a reservoir or pool of thought substance, which is the result of his own mental activity, of his innate receptivity, and which provides the material for teaching and the fount of knowledge upon which he can draw when he seeks to aid other people. Okay, so a reservoir of thought as a result of his own mental activity, of his innate receptivity, which provides the material for teaching and the fount of knowledge. I like that image, upon which he can draw to aid other people, upon which he can draw. Now, there's no doubt that a master can aid other people. So can a high initiate. The question is, how successful are we when we try to aid other people, even in humble ways, as I've used as an example. a mentor and his student. Or I think they kind of developed this in the arcane school, a group of mentors revolving and a group of students. Well, it's a humble level from which that work is being done, but still maybe it can be effective and has kind of an analogy or parallel to what a master or high initiate can most certainly do, due to long practice over centuries. You have to think that in the days when Master DK was supposedly in relation to Pythagoras, a man called Cleinias, known as the Just Greek, that he was very learned. So the learnedness of the Tibetan, I think, did not even begin with his very important association with Pythagoras, which is one of the outstanding depictions of that association. The association may have existed before in a different context. When the Buddha became head of the hierarchy, perhaps it was at a time, I'm just, speculating here, near the death of Krishna, when many might be suspected as moving up, maybe the Tibetan or Arya Sangha, known that way at different times and by other names, also moved up, and Pythagoras, the one who was Pythagoras, also moved up. It's the question of the creation of a vacuum. If the ones above you move up, they create a vacancy which must be filled. Of course, from another perspective, they can't move up unless those who are to take their place are ready. So, we could be in our own sort of self-centered way holding back the progress of more advanced initiates to whom we are related. So that's another incentive towards taking our developmental responsibilities seriously. So, think about it for a moment. Where is your pool of thought substance, which is the result of your own mental activity? Another way of looking at this, DK said, how much of the mountain of vision have you climbed for yourself? And then we begin to think about standing on the shoulders of giants. And is it a Newtonian statement that if I seem to know more than many men, something like that, it's because I've stood on the shoulders of giants? And that has to be contemplated, of course. I like this material for teaching and the fount of knowledge. Somehow reminds me, except it would be the life aspect, of the fountain of youth. But we remember that Adam was given the fruit of the tree of knowledge under the prompting of the serpent, a wise serpent, I suspect. But he was prevented from eating of the tree of life and attaining some kind of immortality, which would have been inimical to the future development of humanity. We have to find a way to separate what is myth from what is reality, or what do the myths stand for anyway? Probably, much more, normal kinds of things than the elaborate stories that the myths contain. And yet, as I've said, Master Moria tells us that every legend is true. So what is your fount of knowledge? What is your material for teaching? How much of this material and how much from the fount have you derived for yourself through your own, what's it called up here? Through your own mental activity? Or, like so many people today, if it is said dogmatically and repetitively and with a significant number of others which reinforce what is said, one simply believes it, not necessarily for any good reason at all. As a matter of fact, reason is not involved, especially pure reason, or abstract mind, or pure reason where people are really thinking for themselves. So might we not say, when we have students and we try to help them advance, that to encourage them to think for themselves is very important. It's so easy these days with computer technology to fall victim to cut and pastitis, the inflammation of the cut and paste tendency. It makes one feel one is saying something, but one has hardly thought through what one is cutting and pasting, and it doesn't show any real progression in thought. Well, we learned that as we go along. When I first went to the arcane school in 1980, amazing, more than 40 years ago, one of my first tasks was to work at the secretarial desk. I was very sincere, and typewriters were very noisy, and I think I did my own fair share in driving my co-workers a little bit to distraction as an earnest and hard-hammering typist. But I learned we had to read everything, every one of us. And after a while, it was possible to get mental indigestion, reading all those tens and tens of papers, maybe amounting even to hundreds of reports. But there has been progression, and students also have taken advantage of that progression and began to include as their answers to questions reports that had nothing to do with their own thinking, because they were simply based upon cut and paste. We have the same problem at first with the Moria Federation, the internet wing, so to speak, of the University of the Seven Rays. People love the ease of cut and paste, but they don't benefit much from that particular tendency. And they have to be kind of alerted to their tendency. Anyway, DK comes up with periodical summaries here. Here he says, the essential point to be grasped is that sensitivity to impression is a normal and natural unfoldment paralleling the entire paralleling spiritual development. And he harkens back to something that he said earlier. So I'll put that in, and basically sensitivity is a normal and natural unfoldment. We have to have that particular trust. It is the ambitious students who oftentimes get themselves into trouble. Master Hilarion tells us to cast out ambition, but to work as those who are truly ambitious, which I suppose means to work very hard. So here is the entire process, he says, a clue to the entire process. He's going back to bring to our attention, quote, sensitivity to impression involves the engendering of a magnetic aura upon which the highest impressions can play. Now, basically, he's saying to us, really think about this. Sensitivity to impression involves the engendering of a magnetic aura upon which the highest impressions can play. So there is something in the what we normally call our aura, which attracts energies from higher points of tension. Well, there are a lot of people for whom that just doesn't exist. Higher energies, higher impressions cannot impact their aura because it is not sufficiently magnetic. That's really, in these days when occultism, spiritual occultism is only coming to the fore and most of humanity isn't ready for it, that is the usual case. And even among ourselves, we have to go through that transition where we become, instead of academically interested, truly sensitive to impression. If we have a magnetic aura, it has to attract something, doesn't it? And if we're dealing with spiritual occultism and not with some kind of perversion, as now and then appears, as during the Second World War, etc., and under other circumstances, then we will attract substance energy from the higher realms and points of tension. But we've got to think these things through. I'm talking to myself as much as to you because I just realize that if I just go over what is said in a light manner, it's not going to work. I will not have the real experience or imperience. I will not have it because the reality factor will be missing. So when DK actually takes the trouble to repeat something that he said earlier, because he does try to avoid repetition, he may come in on the same subject from a different angle, but he tries not to use exactly the same words quite often in his teaching. But when he does, as in this case, you know it's important. And up earlier here, he points our attention to something that he really thinks is important. It's like we would not know unless we were guided to focus on the importance of certain statements And that's probably very true. He has, I think, nothing to lose by orienting us. The plan is then the dynamic substance energy, powerfully moving substance energy, providing the content of the reservoir of thought on which he can draw. That requires pondering, especially because we are alerted to the statement that this is a statement of unique and unusual importance. Sometimes when you think of the word plan, it gets simplified into the idea of, well, just think ahead and carry out what you thought about, which in a way is also true. But there's more to it when you're thinking esoterically. It is actually powerfully moving energy, which provides, if properly appropriated, the content of the reservoir of thought upon which the master can draw. Obviously, or high initiate, obviously he is enriched by this substance energy. He might not normally think these things up for himself, but when he ponders on what has been impressed upon him, and he ponders in his own light, then something builds up which can be of great benefit to others and to his own spiritual enterprises and projects. Okay. Yeah, we're just not going to go beyond this dividing section. As much as at this hour I would love to forge ahead, and have forged ahead till 4:30, 5:30 in the a.m., but it wasn't too good for the balance of the life, and my wife, who is wiser in these things than I am, rather implored me to try to change my schedule a little bit. Well, actually, quite a lot. So DK goes on to say, I would have you give the deepest consideration to these words. Sensitivity to impression involves the engendering of a magnetic aura upon which the highest impressions can play. And obviously, the love-wisdom energy is highly magnetic, and I suppose useful, no matter what the ray upon which one is principally working. So, the question will come up, how does one engender a magnetic aura? Well, being very observant and very thoughtful and loving and harmonizing. Of course, I'm giving it to you from the 2-4-6 angle, but that's how I see it. The great all-absorbent ray is the second ray. And when you read in Letters on Occult Meditation about the relationship of the great indigo ray to the other rays, there are 7 subsidiaries, and one of them is sort of like indigo. See, we are being given just a little something of the vastness of DK's knowledge and his accumulated thought, which makes possible appropriate response to whatever his degree of sensitivity detects. So if, he's an initiate as far as we know at this time of the 5th degree, what must the Chohan know? Or a Chohan of the 7th degree like the Christ, or at least becoming a full 7th degree Chohan. But we will have to take it step by step and not be excessively ambitious in a personal sense if we want to avoid causing damage to ourselves and others. So DK is telling us here, I would have you give the deepest consideration to these words. As the disciple begins to demonstrate soul quality, and the second divine aspect takes possession of him and controls and colors his entire life, automatically the higher sensitivity is developed. Okay. I'll just, I don't so much get to use that color indigo, but I will here. Whatever type of disciple it may be, the second divine aspect takes possession of him. He moves from subservience to the primordial ray to cooperation with the divine ray. And he wants us here to have the deepest consideration of his words. So, the thing about the Tibetan is he just doesn't speak lightly about important things. He is giving us something that really demands our attention as he begins to demonstrate soul quality. Now, are we doing that? And how do we know? As the disciple begins to develop soul quality, okay, sometimes I hear noises as if somebody's talking. Turns out to be me. Are we demonstrating real soul quality? It seems easy. We talk about it all the time. But do we do so? In the midst of our daily round, is it soul quality we are demonstrating? But we do want that second divine aspect to take hold, as I said, regardless of the ray upon which we may be working. He talks about the control of this aspect and the coloration of this aspect, which we can assume is the indigo ray, which is broad and inclusive. This higher sensitivity will naturally be developed. And DK goes on to say, he becomes a magnet for spiritual ideas and concepts. He attracts into his field of consciousness the outline and later the details of the hierarchical plan. He becomes aware eventually of the planetary purpose. Yeah. All those possibilities develop. He becomes a magnet for spiritual ideas and concepts. He attracts the outline and later the details. And he becomes aware of planetary purpose, the details of the plan, but first the outline. We can even begin with the third of the great invocations, giving us the outline of the divine plan, the encapsulation of the divine plan. So we ask ourselves, am I a magnet for spiritual ideas and concepts? Well, after years of study, let's hope so. Do we have at least the outline of the divine plan, if not the details, which are not yet really allowed at our particular stage of evolution? And eventually, of course, our will may strengthen and our sense of purpose may strengthen, but we certainly are not aware in any detail of planetary purpose. We do say, from the center where the will of God is known, let purpose guide the little wills of men, the purpose which the masters know and serve. But that is a generality. We cannot know the detail beyond the knowing aloud. And even it's not even fully allowed to the normal members of hierarchy. And the way we know that is that the name of Sanat Kumara is known only in part and in certain letters and through certain syllables to most members of the hierarchy. Maybe the Buddhas of activity who have come from a previous solar system to assist Sanat Kumara, maybe they know his fuller name. And if we knew the fuller name of Sanat Kumara, would that be the same as knowing the full name of the planetary logos, yet alone the full name of the logoi of the sacred planets and of the solar logos? All these are deeply hidden mysteries. And maybe that the chief hierarch in any of these entities or points of tension is the only one who knows his full name, except, of course, a higher being like, let's say, the solar logos. In other words, the planetary logos and his solar logos may know the full name of the planetary logos, and the solar logos and his cosmic logos may know the full name of the solar logos, and on it would go. We are known by those who are superior to us, but we do not know on our own the fullness of their superiority embodied to a great extent in the mysteries of their name. So, okay. So this is how things begin to work for the developing human being, the higher initiate, the esoterically developing entity. You know, you could ask yourself, what kind of thoughts do I attract? Well, we don't want to be attracting too many thoughts from the lowest levels of the astral plane. And yet, if you take a look at it, and you look at that genre found in a certain type of movie or film, they're just horror films. And it's pretty obvious that they involve the lowest levels of the astral plane. Well, I think it's rather difficult to be tantalized by that kind of astrality and at the same time be undergoing esoteric development concerning spiritual ideas and concepts and the outline of the divine plan and eventually the details of the divine plan. It's a bit of a contradiction. Of course, human beings are, under the number 4, filled with contradictions. There's a phrase that is sometimes used, if I can remember it, in relation to Pisces, and maybe to the 4th ray, a bundle of contradictions tied together by the cord of discontent. It's quite colorful. And you do see some of the suffering 4th ray lives that are exactly that, embodying both the high and the much lower, such extremes, and yet not impossible to entertain such extremes. Going on with the Tibetan, all these impressions are not things which he must seek out and learn laboriously to ascertain, to hold and seize upon. They drop into his field of consciousness because he has created a magnetic aura which will invoke them and bring them into his mind. Okay. So, how do those thoughts arise? How does that sensitivity to spiritual ideas and concepts and the outline of the plan and later the details, how do they become part of the consciousness of a high initiate or a master? And we're being taught here how that happens. They're not things that he must seek out and learn laboriously. Apparently, it's a much more natural process, laboriously to ascertain and hold and seize upon. A more natural process is at work as these ideas, concepts, etc., drop into his field of consciousness, simply because he has been working to create the magnetic aura, which calls upon them, invokes them, and brings them to his mind in a quite natural way. Okay, this magnetic aura, how does it form, right? This magnetic aura begins to form itself from the first moment he makes contact with his soul. It deepens and grows as those contacts increase in frequency and eventually become eventually an habitual state of consciousness. Then, at will and at all times, he is en rapport with the soul, the second divine aspect. So I'll, when it mentions the second divine aspect, I will bring in, whoa, that's not going to do, is it? So let's see. Okay. So when does it start to form? From the very first soul contact. And it deepens and grows as those contacts increase in frequency and eventually become a habitual state of consciousness. Probably, if we were to look at it, we're not going to find that this state of consciousness is for us habitual. But it deepens and grows as these contacts increase in frequency and become the habitual state of our consciousness. Then we're always living in soul consciousness. It's a question you can ask people when they're in the middle of doing their customary non-soul reactivity and response. Where is the soul now? Are you responding to the soul? We could ask that. And if the person is serious, they will pause and they will realize that no, I'm just in my habitual nature, which is largely reactive and astral, or else perhaps filled with illusion and wrong interpretation, and in any case, it's what I always use in such circumstances. But they will realize that they don't necessarily have always to use it. Well, we've made it up to page 96, just our usual couple of pages. It's not a big we've got 15 pages in this section, but I seem with my inserts to have to do it that way. So this was commentary 37, and our date is largely 30th of November, and here the 1 December 2021, and that's the end of number 37. So that's END. And it's 94 to 96. I just don't seem to be able to go faster. And program 38 will be next, but it will be December, but I'll put my usual X's and start from page 96. And I think the thing to do next is this. I'll try to. This is going to be the small program. Okay, just a little program. And let's see if I can do it properly. And browsing and telepathy collection, and we're at program number 37. And we'll see, I think, it's usually only about 17 kilobytes. It's complete, but in smaller form. And now we'll look at the entire thing. No, if I want the entire thing, I have to do it this way. Yeah, I have to do it this way. So I will go here and browse and telepathy collection, and it will be number 37, and it will be relatively complete. And I'll be sending this out to our dedicated communications staff. There's some conversion that has to occur, and you will be receiving it one way or another, either from what BL and Joe and Harold upload, or from that special kind of sendings list that Michael Crow sends out. So, okay. I just want to say that's going to be all for tonight. And hopefully everything is clear enough. And original sound has been off. Okay. And I'll stop our recording. Wishing you lots of love and good absorption from Tuya and myself and the whole communications team. Okay, friends, that will be it for tonight, and you'll be receiving soon. I'll stop this recording and hope for the best. Okay. Bye for now.